The Nike Alphafly 3, ZoomX foam, a carbon fiber plate, and 2 air zoom units. As Nike says, the same ingredients, but a better recipe. Is that true though? I've been talking about this shoe for almost a full year on this channel, and I've covered it in every conceivable way I could think of, from first looks to design talks to product design analysis, the implications of this for Nike's innovation supercycle and just super shoes in general. But I had not covered what it's like to run in this shoe, because for the first 7 months of 2024, I could not get a pair of these. But in July, I finally did, and now I've been out in it. Now, my first intention was to cover this shoe at 50 miles because everyone has covered this shoe already. I'm probably the last YouTuber to talk about this shoe, at least from a running review standpoint. However, I realized that it's going to be a while before I get this shoe to 50 miles. Not because it's not a good shoe, it's just because I'm not focused on the marathon distance right now and I'm just not doing that type of volume. So I decided after 42K, or about 26 miles, and all of that being workouts specifically, so all quality miles, that I'm finally ready to talk about this shoe. So there's a lot I want to say about this shoe, and it's time to finally get into it. Starting with the specs on this shoe, we have 40 mil foam in the heel, 32 mil foam in the forefoot, giving you an 8 mil drop. Now this is one of the rare shoes I've run in this year that actually feels like what the drop is spec'd from the manufacturer. This shoe feels like an 8 mil drop. It puts me up on my toes. And even though this is ZoomX foam and you do sink into it, I get the same amount of sink in the heel and the forefoot. So it always feels like there is an 8 mil drop in this shoe. I think it works for this shoe, but some people may be taken off guard on that a little bit because it is a true 8 mil. Now this shoe weighs 7 ounces or about 199 grams. That's in the standard US men's size 9 reference size. That also happens to be my size. So my actual pair of these come in at 199 grams and 200 grams left and right respectively. And what I'm going to describe the ride of this shoe as is bottomless. Now I'll talk more about that in the ride section of this video, but basically it just feels like when you foot strike in this shoe, you're just sinking endlessly in this shoe, but for whatever reason, it always responds back and it always propels you out. This is truly maximizing ZoomX foam and all the other technology in the shoe for a bottomless ride and an extreme amount of energy return. This shoe brings what I thought was good energy return for ZoomX foam or previous Alphaflys, and it doubles it, even triples it. This shoe has everything you need for the marathon distance. Starting with the upper on this shoe, and that's usually an area in these first impression videos that I go through fairly quick because there's usually not a ton to say. But in this shoe, there's a lot to say because one of the biggest problems I've had with the Alphafly 1 and 2 is the upper. Now the Atom Knit 3.0 upper in the Alphafly 3 is by far, probably to me, the biggest upgrade in this shoe. And there's a lot of upgrades in this shoe because this upper finally works. It's not a toe crusher like the Alphafly 1 was. It's not just big and bulky and swimming around like it was on the Alphafly 2, which was also a bit of a toe crusher, but more of a blister machine. And it holds your foot in, actually. The Atom Knit 3.0 material is softer. It's more confining to the foot because there's a lot more engineering with the way this is woven, so it actually holds your foot in. And as much as I don't like booty uppers on running shoes, especially top tier racing shoes, this upper works. It holds my foot in. Additionally, if you ever owned or ran an Alphafly, you know how hard it was to get into the Alphafly, especially the Alphafly 1, though the Alphafly 2 was also not easy to get into. This shoe is fairly easy to get into. It's not a huge struggle. There's a lot of softness now in this heel and the Achilles flare in this shoe, and that actually stretches, lets your foot slide in there, and it works really well. Additionally, it snaps back and holds your heel into this shoe, so any heel lift that was in the previous generations of Alphaflys is now gone in this. So not only is it easier to get into, it holds your foot better. And as I said, this is a softer yarn they're using, the Atom Knit 3.0, so it actually now wraps around your foot. Additionally, in the toe box, we actually have a somewhat squared off toe box. This is not a natural shaped toe box. This is not that. But for a Nike, especially a Nike race shoe, this is actually fairly wide in the forefoot, though if you have a wide foot, this is still not a wide shoe. But for a Nike race shoe, this is wide. But more importantly, the lateral side does not swoop in drastically. It's a more gradual swoop in, and there's a lot more room for the big toe in this shoe. So this is actually somewhat foot shaped in the toe box of the shoe, and there's enough volume here. There's a very minimal toe bumper here that keeps this material up off the toe. Plus, with the shape of the toe box, you're not crushing toes. Now, my big toenails, especially on my right foot, have never recovered from the Alphafly 1. It destroyed my big toenail. Like, it destroyed everything about the toenail. I still have problems with the toenail. That's why I have such sensitive toenails with shoes. But I can report in this shoe, it's giving me zero problems. I have had absolutely no toenail problems in the right foot or the left foot in this shoe. So finally, Nike has put an Atom knit upper, booty style upper on an Alphafly that finally works. And frankly, I wouldn't even say I want a standard upper with a movable tongue or a gusseted tongue on this shoe, because I think this upper is perfect for this shoe. So I'm a big fan of this upper, and finally, Nike has made an upper on an Alphafly that doesn't suck. Moving to the midsole of this shoe, this is still a full ZoomX midsole with a carbon fiber plate and 2 Air Zoom units, Air Pods. But the biggest surprise for me in the midsole of this shoe, and it's something I talked endlessly about in all the design overviews, product design analysis, all that content I did on this shoe, but until I got a pair of these, I held it in my hand, I did not understand how much of this midsole is actually cut out of this shoe. Now, Nike's been talking about reductive design for quite a bit of this year. In fact, I'm going to make a whole video about that and the implications for this shoe in particular. That will be out in the coming weeks, so subscribe if you want to see that pop up in your feed. But I was shocked how much of this midsole is cut out. I can't show you, I can't get the camera angles to show you, but while this is a continuous midsole, which is the other big change, I'll get to that in a moment, basically there's no foam here around the pods. It's all cut back, it's all angled back, letting the AirPods flex and compress the way they need to. There's no foam in there that's conflicting with that. But even down into the heel, there's a ton of foam removed here. And even in the heel itself, there's a ton of foam removed from the heel. So your heel sits here, but the actual kind of rocker of the heel is actually in front of the end of your heel. Now, as a heel striker, I could see where that would be an issue, but there's so much width back here, and this crash zone of the heel zone of the midsole, because there's a very clear forefoot zone and a heel zone, captures your foot, centers your foot, gets your foot to the AirPods, and allows you to get all of the engineering in the forefoot of the shoe. The heel in this shoe works really well overall. I'm actually, again, shocked how much foam is actually removed from the shoe. Nike's doing that to save weight, but the thing that really surprises me is you don't feel it. It doesn't feel like there's any gaps. It doesn't feel like there's any voids. There's no soft spots in this shoe. It's all very expertly removed, and it makes the shoe flex and run very naturally. And that's the other big change to this midsole. The decoupled heel and forefoot is now gone in this shoe. Nike talked a lot about the continuous midsole design. Now, I knew that would be a big deal, but I didn't know how much of a big deal it actually would be. Because now this shoe runs like a normal shoe. It doesn't feel like a big technical booty on your foot like the Alphafly 1 or 2 did. This feels like a running shoe. This feels like what you would expect it to feel like, and it feels great. Another key detail about this shoe in the midsole specifically is the carbon fiber plate being much wider. Now, in the forefoot, it's still the same width, but the width in the midfoot in the heel has been extended quite a bit. What that gives you is a much, much more stable platform to really engage these AirPods and really pressure them between the carbon fiber plate and the ground. And it works really well. a lot of the instability that was in the Alphafly platform, not only from the decoupled heel and forefoot of the Alphafly 1 and 2 and how that shoe would twist, but just from the very narrow plate in the midfoot and heel, is gone in this shoe. So this now is a very stable platform. And again, it makes this shoe run very naturally, and it makes, no matter where you're striking the ground, it brings you into the forefoot to really engage these AirPods in a very, very smooth way. It's some brilliant engineering, a very subtle change, but it makes a world of difference in how this shoe actually runs. And rounding all that out with the outsole of this shoe, I think there's actually a big change on this outsole that I didn't really hear a lot of people stressing and really talking about. I covered it a lot in my design analysis, but it's these two orange pucks, which sit directly below the Air Zoom AirPods in this shoe. Now, these are elevated above everything else on the outsole. So when you're contacting the ground, however you're contacting the ground, whether you're a forefoot striker like myself, your heel striker that's rolling into the forefoot, or a midfoot striker that's landing fairly flat, these are actually hitting the ground first. And what that's actually doing is giving you the initial compression of the Air Zoom unit, but then immediately the foam that's around here smooths all that out. So in the Alphafly 1 and 2, especially in the 1, the Air Zoom units would feel very mechanical because there wasn't anything around them to smooth them out. You would hit the Air Zoom unit and it would just be this very mechanical, often very squeaky feel. And it just, some people liked it. I really did not like it, and it did not work for me. But in this shoe, you're still compacting those Air Zoom units. You're getting that softness, but then the foam is really smoothing all of that out. Now that it's a continuous midsole, you're getting all the foam in the forefoot in front of the units, which there feels like there's more foam up here, and you're getting the foam that's now in the midfoot. Even though there's a lot of cutaways in here, it's all angled and structured that as this midsole compresses, all of this foam is kind of structuring around these Air Zoom units and really smoothing everything out. It gives this shoe a very, very smooth ride. Now, the rest of the outsole I think is really good. I think this is probably the best outsole that's been on any Alphafly to date. They definitely learned a lot from the Vaporfly because this has a very Vaporfly 3-like outsole, meaning it's very thin, but it's waffled. The waffles will give it more thickness where you need it, but it's reductive design. It's cut out where you don't need it, so it's saving weight. So this outsole is very similar to what's on the Vaporfly 3, but it just works here, saves a lot of weight. In the heel, we have less rubber in the heel, but I think it's placed better. Heavy heel strikers, I still don't think this is the best shoe for you, though it's going to work better, I think, than previous Alphaflys. But there's enough coverage back here that will protect the shoe and will give you some durability. You should get better durability in this shoe as a heel striker than you did typically in the Vaporfly 3. So what is the ride like in this shoe? Well, I've alluded to that a bunch of times, but it's very, very natural. This feels like a normal running shoe. I'm not going to say it feels like the Vaporfly 3. It still has that Air Zoom unit, but again, it's all smoothed out. So this shoe feels much more natural to strike, transition off the toe, no matter where you're striking and engaging the AirPods. It's just a very, very smooth, very confidence-inducing ride. And that's something I could never say about the previous Alphaflys. Now, the other big change with this shoe, and I think it has to do with the weight savings, the cutouts, the reductive design, the continuous midsole, is that this shoe is now agile. This is still a fairly big shoe. It's a very wide platform, but it is agile. So the big problem I had with the Alphafly 1 and 2, especially the Alphafly 2, is that it was very good about locking into a pace, usually your marathon pace, and as long as you stayed at that pace, it was totally fine. But if you ever needed to accelerate, like for example at a water station, you get behind, you get disconnected from the pace group you're with, and you need to catch back up with them, which means you kind of need to sprint to get them, forget it. You're never going to do that in an Alphafly 2. It feels like you're running in mud. It just was a very unpleasant shoe to accelerate in. The Alphafly 1 was a little bit better, but that had other issues that would probably come to a head before you even got to that point. But in this shoe, I can accelerate. I can go from marathon pace easily into 10K or even 5K pace, bring it back down, go into steady pace, slower than marathon pace. This shoe's just very, very versatile as far as the paces that it'll handle. And as I said, I've only put 42K on this shoe, or about 26 miles, but it's all been workouts. I've been running this shoe through a lot of different workouts, marathon pace through 5K pace. I've even been doing 200s in this shoe. Doing 200s in an Alphafly was something I never thought possible. I never thought I would do that. When I tried it in the Alphafly 1 because I thought it was very agile and springy and worked really well, no, it was like running in concrete or mud. It just was like so bulky, so unpleasant. But this shoe works for pretty much every pace that I could think of for road racing. Now, I did a whole data deep dive video. I'll put a link in the description. This is one of the shoes that really stood out to me in that data set. So if you're curious how this shoe works from a data standpoint, go check that video out. Link in the description. But this has been a very versatile shoe that I've found very good at marathon pace. But surprisingly, this shoe works really, really well for me around 5K pace. Again, something I never would have expected an Alphafly to be good at is shorter road racing. But this shoe is definitely very agile, very, very fast, and it's very effective for me as a runner. Nike made a big claim with this Alphafly. They said that this is the Alphafly that's going to make all the Vaporfly runners reconsider the Alphafly again. Now, as someone who considers themselves very much a Vaporfly runner, I can say they were correct. If I had to go race a marathon this fall or in the spring next year, this would be the shoe I would do it in. While it is just about the same efficiency as the Vaporfly 3 for me, I can see how in the last 10K of a marathon, the technology in this shoe, the AirPods, the wider carbon fiber plate, all of that is going to really aid me in continuing the pace that I want to run in that final hard 10K, much more than the Vaporfly is. This shoe is really optimized around the marathon, and I totally get that. Now, next year in 2025, that will be the Vaporfly 4 year, and it'll be interesting to compare the Vaporfly 4 to this shoe, because again, what we've seen in the Vaporfly 4 is a lot of the reductive design and cutting out of unneeded material in this shoe is in the Vaporfly 4. So I'll be really curious how those two shoes compare. But as of right now, this is by far the marquee marathon racer from Nike. And I can't see any reason why, if you're a marathoner and you like Nike, you want to run in a Nike, you wouldn't pick this shoe at this point. From a design standpoint, as I said, I've already covered this shoe quite a bit from the design and product design perspectives. Again, link in the description to that content. But there's a lot of really important implications and hints to, I think, the future of Nike running in this shoe. As I alluded to earlier in this video, I'm going to make a whole video about that, specifically about the future of the Alphafly, because I think there's been some stuff that Nike's been talking about in the press recently, and some of the emphasis on air technology that really makes this shoe stand out and really makes this shoe much more important than I thought it was. So stay tuned for that if you're interested. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you find this content useful, consider subscribing. You'll see more content from me pop up in your feed. If not, drop a like on this video because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.